The galaxy paid to watch a human die in under 12 seconds. What they got instead rewrote every combat law they believed in. Krovic had seen approximately 4,632 fights in his career as the Grand Celestial Coliseum's lead commentator, and he could smell a massacre coming from 3 sectors away. This was going to be a massacre. The arena stretched out below his commentator's booth, like a vast circular mouth waiting to swallow something small and crunchy. 60,000 spectators packed the crystalline seats, and every single one of them had paid premium credits to watch what they assumed would be a brief, violent, and entirely predictable conclusion to an utterly mismatched pairing. The energy shields hummed at maximum capacity because when Thorvik the Bone Crusher fought, the front rows needed protection from the splatter. Krovic adjusted his translation implant and leaned into the microphone, his 3-fingered hand toggling the arena-wide broadcast system. "Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted carbon-based life forms," he began, his voice booming across the Colosseum with practiced enthusiasm. "Welcome to what historians will probably record as the shortest title defense in Colosseum history. I am your host, Krovic Telnaxian, and I have absolutely zero idea what we are all doing here." The crowd roared with laughter. They loved it when he got sarcastic. They had paid good money for blood and humor, and Krovic was contractually obligated to provide both. "In the red corner," he continued, gesturing with 2 of his forearms toward the massive entrance gate that was currently grinding open with dramatic slowness, "we have the reigning, undefeated, catastrophically violent champion of the Outer Rim Circuit, Thorvik the Bone Crusher, species Krathnalian, height 4 meters, weight 600 kilograms of pure concentrated aggression, win record 73 consecutive victories, 49 of which ended before his opponent's family could finish placing their bets." The crowd went absolutely feral. Thorvik had fans, lots of them, mostly people who enjoyed watching physics apply itself to softer beings in creative ways. "And in the blue corner," Krovic said, his voice dropping several octaves into what could only be described as profound confusion mixed with pity, "we have, and I am reading this correctly, Rena Vasquez, species human, height 1.7 meters, weight, I am not allowed to say because apparently humans have something called manners about that. Win record, 0. Loss record, also 0, but only because this is somehow her first professional fight." The laughter that erupted was not kind. It was the kind of laughter that happened when 60,000 beings simultaneously realized they were about to witness something that technically qualified as entertainment but morally qualified as a crime. Krovic squinted down at the blue corner entrance. The gate had opened, but the human had not emerged yet. He could see her standing just inside the tunnel, a small silhouette against the harsh preparation lights. She was not moving. She was not psyching herself up. She was not doing whatever pre-fight ritual humans did before walking into their own funerals. She was just standing there, waiting. For those keeping track at home, Krovic added, because the silence was getting awkward, the current betting odds are 8,000 to 1 in favor of Thorvik. The over-under on how many seconds this fight lasts is currently set at 11.5, and the Colosseum medical team has requested that spectators in rows 1 through 15 please activate your personal shields because, well, you know why. The human finally stepped forward into the light. Krovic got his first good look at Rena Vasquez, and his immediate thought was, this is a mistake. This is a massive, paperwork-generating, lawsuit-inducing mistake. She looked ordinary. Painfully ordinary. Brown skin, dark hair pulled back in something humans called a ponytail, wearing standard arena combat gear that seemed about 3 sizes too tactical for someone with no natural weapons, no armor plating, no subdermal reinforcement, and no apparent survival instinct. She walked to the center of the arena with steady steps, her boots making small crunching sounds against the sand-covered floor. She did not wave to the crowd. She did not acknowledge the jeering. She did not even look at Thorvik, who had emerged from the opposite tunnel like a walking natural disaster. She just stopped in her designated corner, rolled her shoulders once, and stared straight ahead at nothing in particular. Krovic had seen that look before. It was the look of someone who had already made peace with something. He had just assumed, until this exact moment, that the something was death. Now he was not entirely sure. Krovic pulled up the species file on his data pad while the arena technicians performed their final safety checks, because he wanted to remind himself exactly why this fight was being allowed to happen in the first place. Humans. Class 7 sentient species. Homeworld, Earth, located in some forgettable arm of the Milky Way that most navigation systems rounded down to not worth the fuel. Population, 8 billion. Give or take a few million who probably died doing something statistically improbable. Galactic threat assessment, negligible. Recommended response if encountered, mild caution, mostly because they talked a lot and it got annoying. The file read like a comedy routine written by the universe itself. Physical capabilities. Laughable. No claws. No fangs. No venom glands. No exoskeleton. No subdermal armor plating. No redundant organ systems. Their bones broke if you looked at them wrong, their skin tore easier than cheap packaging material, and they required oxygen at such specific concentrations that half the galaxy's atmospheres would kill them in under 2 minutes. They had persistence hunting as their primary evolutionary advantage, which was a fancy way of saying they were too stupid to quit chasing things until either they or the thing they were chasing collapsed from exhaustion. Inspiring? Sure, if you were into participation trophies, natural weapons. 0. They had soft fingernails that they compulsively trimmed and teeth that required constant maintenance or they rotted out of their heads. Their most dangerous physical feature was apparently their ability to throw objects with accuracy, which was adorable considering that every other species had invented ranged weapons approximately 5 minutes after achieving sentience. Krovik scrolled further down the file, shaking his head at the sheer absurdity of it all. Their emotional regulation was a galactic punchline. Humans cried when they were sad. They also cried when they were happy, and angry, and frustrated, and moved by music. They leaked fluids from their face based on feelings, which was both disgusting and impractical. They formed emotional attachments to anything that held still long enough, including inanimate objects, plants, and animals that actively tried to kill them. There were documented cases of humans keeping creatures called cats that showed them nothing but contempt, and the humans called this companionship. Their military record was somehow even worse. 73 recorded conflicts with other species since joining the galactic community, and their win-loss record was 2-71. The 2 wins were against species that had not yet invented space travel and were honestly more confused than defeated. The 71 losses included 3 separate occasions where they had surrendered before the fighting actually started, which Krovik had to admit showed a refreshing amount of self-awareness. Betting on a human in any competitive context was considered the financial equivalent of setting your credits on fire and then apologizing to the fire for wasting its time. And yet here stood Rena Vasquez, representing her species in the most violent combat arena in 4 sectors, about to fight a champion who had literally pulled opponents into pieces for the entertainment of crowds just like this one. Krovik closed the file and set down his datapad. The Colosseum would like to remind all attendees, he announced, his voice dripping with the kind of sarcasm that came from decades of watching the improbable become the inevitable, that while we have medical personnel standing by, their primary function today will likely be cleanup rather than life-saving. Humans are not covered under the standard resurrection protocols due to their absurdly fragile biology, so what you are about to witness is, technically speaking, the crowd cheered even louder. Rena Vasquez still had not moved from her corner. She stood there, hands loose at her sides, breathing steady, eyes fixed on something nobody else could see. Krovik felt the smallest twinge of something that might have been concern, but he squashed it immediately. He had 4,632 fights worth of experience telling him exactly how this was going to end. Thorvik the Bone Crusher entered the arena like a natural disaster with a publicity team. The entire Colosseum shook with each step he took, his massive clawed feet digging into the sand with the casual ease of something that had never encountered resistance. It could not simply pulverize. 4 arms, each one thick as a human torso, flexed and rotated through their full range of motion. His crystalline exoskeleton caught the arena lights and split them into 1,000 fractured rainbows that danced across the screaming crowd. Krovik leaned back in his seat and whistled, a sound his species made when confronted with something genuinely impressive and probably lethal. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said into the microphone, "I have described Thorvik as many things over his career. A fighter, a champion, a walking violation of several physics principles that I do not understand. But today, looking at him next to his opponent, I think the most accurate description is mobile architecture. That is not a person. That is a building that has decided to engage in violence." The crowd roared its approval. Thorvik raised all 4 arms in acknowledgement, his mandibles clicking together in what passed for a smile among Crathnalians. His species did not have faces in the way most beings understood them, but they had expressions, and Thorvik's current expression translated roughly to "I am going to enjoy this." He stood 4 meters tall. Easy. His exoskeleton was the color of smoke and iron, marked with 73 kill tallies etched into the plating along his primary arms. Each mark represented a fight where his opponent had not walked out under their own power. Most had not walked out at all. Across the arena, Rena Vasquez looked like someone had accidentally delivered the wrong package to the wrong address, and was too embarrassed to correct the mistake. She had not moved. She stood in her corner, weight balanced evenly on both feet, hands still loose at her sides. If she was intimidated by the 4-meter wall of crystalline death currently doing a victory lap before the fight had even started, she was hiding it extremely well. Or she was in shock. Krovik was genuinely uncertain which option was more likely. The arena's central holo display lit up, counting down from 10. The crowd joined in. 60,000 voices synchronized in a countdown that felt less like anticipation and more like a funeral procession that had decided to be festive about it. 10. 9. 8. Thorvik cracked his neck, a sound like boulders grinding together. 7. 6. 5. Rena rolled her shoulders once. Twice. That was it. That was her entire preparation. 4. 3. 2. Krovik found himself leaning forward despite himself, which was ridiculous because he already knew how this ended. 1. The starting klaxon blared across the Colosseum, a sound designed to trigger every fight or flight instinct in every species present. Thorvik moved first because of course he did. He lunged across the arena with speed that should not have been possible for something his size, all 4 arms extending, claws glinting, his entire body a guided missile of crystalline hate aimed directly at the small human standing motionless in the blue corner. The crowd went silent in that particular way. Crowds do when they are about to witness something catastrophic and want to remember every detail. Rena moved at the last possible second, not backward, not to the side. She moved forward, toward Thorvik, dropping low and sliding under his primary strike with a precision that looked accidental but could not possibly have been. His claws swept through empty air where her head had been exactly 1/4 of a second earlier. The crowd gasped. Krovik sat up straighter. Thorvik stumbled, his momentum carrying him past his target, his expression shifting from confident to confused in the span of a heartbeat. Rena came up out of her slide behind him, already pivoting, already moving, and for just a fraction of a second Krovik saw something in her eyes that made absolutely no sense given the species file he had just reviewed. She was smiling. Not the smile of someone who was relieved to have survived the first exchange. Not the smile of someone who was running on adrenaline and panic. The smile of someone who had just confirmed a theory. Thorvik spun around, all 4 arms swinging in a wide arc designed to catch anything within a 3-meter radius. It was his signature move. It had ended 17 fights before they really began. It was unavoidable by anything that obeyed normal physics. Rena ducked under it, stepped inside his guard, and drove her elbow into the joint where his lower left arm connected to his torso. The sound was not loud. It was a small, precise crack, barely audible over the crowd noise. But Thorvik roared. The entire Colosseum heard that. Krovik's datapad slipped from his hand and clattered onto the console. "Oh," he said into the microphone, his voice suddenly much quieter than it had been 30 seconds ago. "Oh no." The crowd was not laughing anymore. Thorvik stumbled backward, cradling his lower left arm against his torso, and the entire dynamic of the arena shifted like gravity had suddenly decided to flow in a different direction. Rena Vasquez did not press her advantage. She did not rush forward for a follow-up strike. She did not celebrate the hit or play to the crowd or do any of the theatrical nonsense that 90% of fighters did when they landed their first significant blow. She took 1 step forward, just 1, and everything changed. Krovik had been commentating fights for 3 decades, and he had never seen a single step carry that much weight. It was not aggressive. It was not defensive. It was not hesitant or cocky or desperate. It was a step that said, with perfect clarity, "I am exactly where I need to be, and you are exactly where I want you." Her posture shifted, not dramatically, not in any way that would look impressive on a highlight reel, but her shoulders dropped 1/2 inch. Her stance widened by maybe 2 centimeters, and her center of gravity sank lower in a way that made her look simultaneously smaller and significantly more dangerous. Her hands came up, loose and ready, fingers slightly curved, Not fists. Not yet. Just hands that knew precisely what they were capable of and were waiting for permission to demonstrate. But it was her eyes that made Krovik's secondary stomach clench with something he refused to call fear, because that would be ridiculous. They had changed. 30 seconds ago, Rena Vasquez had looked like someone who was mentally preparing for violence. Now she looked like someone who had been born in it, raised by it, and had recently returned home after a long absence. Her eyes were not wide with panic or narrow with rage. They were calm, focused, clinical. She was reading Thorvik the way a mechanic read a broken machine, cataloging weaknesses, calculating angles, measuring the exact amount of force required to disassemble something that had been put together incorrectly. The crowd had gone quiet, not silent, because 60,000 beings could never be truly silent, but quiet in the way that happened when people suddenly realized they had misunderstood something fundamental. Krovik glanced down at the lower-level seats, where the serious money sat, where retired fighters and combat instructors and people who actually understood violence at a professional level paid premium credits for the best view. They were not laughing. A Thexian warform in row 7 had leaned forward. All three eyes locked on Rena with the kind of attention that predators reserved for things that might be other predators. 2 seats down, a Kolvaxian enforcer who had fought in the border wars was gripping the armrest hard enough that the metal was starting to deform. 3 rows back, someone Krovik recognized as a retired champion from the Inner Rim circuit was making rapid notes on a datapad with 2 hands while her other 2 hands gripped her translator implant like she was trying to manually override what it was telling her. They saw it. Whatever had just happened, whatever had just shifted in the arena, the people who actually knew combat had seen it instantly. Krovik felt his mandibles click nervously as he toggled his microphone back on. "So," he said, and his voice came out slightly higher than he intended, "that was unexpected. Thorvik has taken a hit to his lower arm joint, and while that is not traditionally considered a fight-ending injury for a Crathanolian, it is definitely not part of his usual first-minute experience. The human has." She has moved forward. She is now standing approximately 6 meters from Thorvik, and I am going to be completely honest with all of you, I have no idea what I am looking at right now. Thorvik was staring at Rena, with an expression that Krovik had never seen on the champion's face before. It took him a moment to identify it because it was so profoundly out of place. Uncertainty. Thorvik the Bone Crusher, 73 consecutive victories, undefeated champion of the Outer Rim circuit, was uncertain. He flexed his injured arm experimentally. It moved, but not smoothly. Not the way it had 30 seconds ago. He shifted his weight, reassessing, recalculating. His mandibles clicked 3 times in rapid succession. A nervous tick that his fans had never seen because he had never had a reason to be nervous. Rena waited. She did not taunt. She did not encourage him to attack. She did not do anything except stand there and wait with the patience of someone who had all the time in the universe and knew exactly how to spend it. Krovik pulled up the human species file again on his datapad, scanning through it with increasing desperation, looking for something, anything, that explained what he was watching. Persistence hunting, endurance, adaptability, primitive tool use, emotional instability, social pack bonding. Nothing about combat efficiency. Nothing about that step. Nothing about the way she had moved under Thorvik's strike, like she had known exactly where it would be before he had even committed to the attack. "Ladies and gentlemen," Krovik said slowly, his voice dropping into the kind of serious tone he usually reserved for announcing fatalities, "I am beginning to suspect that our intelligence files on humans might be incomplete." Down in the arena, Thorvik made his decision. He roared, a sound that vibrated through the crystalline seats and rattled teeth in skulls, and charged forward with all 4 arms spread wide in a pattern designed to eliminate any possible escape route. Rena Vasquez took another step forward, directly into the charge, and Krovik realized with the kind of crystal clarity that usually preceded something expensive breaking, that every single being in this Colosseum had made the same catastrophic mistake. They had assumed that humans were harmless because humans had not yet decided to stop being harmless. The fight was about to get educational. What happened next should not have been possible according to approximately 17 different scientific disciplines. Rena moved. Not fast in the way that enhanced species moved fast, with chemical augmentation or genetic modification or technological assistance, fast in the way that water moved downhill, like she had simply identified the most efficient path between 2 points and removed all the unnecessary parts of the journey. Thorvik's forearm sweep came in from multiple angles simultaneously, a killing pattern that had crushed, broken, and pulverized everything it had ever touched. It covered every escape vector. It left no openings. It was mathematically perfect violence. Rena went through it anyway. She dropped low, rolled forward under the primary strike, and came up inside Thorvik's guard before his nervous system could register that she had moved at all. Her palm struck his chest plate, not hard, barely a tap, but in exactly the right spot where 3 segments of his exoskeleton met. The crystalline armor made a sound like glass, deciding to reconsider its structural integrity. Thorvik swung down with his upper right arm, claws extended, aiming for her spine. She was not there. She had pivoted left, staying inside his reach where his leverage was weakest, and drove her knee into his lower right leg joint. Not the armor. The joint. The small gap where mobility required flexibility and flexibility meant vulnerability. Thorvik's leg buckled. Not much. Maybe 10 degrees. But it was 10 degrees he had not given permission for, and the shock of it made him hesitate for exactly half a second. Rena used that half second like an artist used a canvas. She grabbed his upper left arm, not fighting his strength but redirecting it. When he pulled back instinctively, she went with him, using his momentum to launch herself upward. Her boot caught him in the mandible joint, snapping his head back, and she twisted in midair, using his arm as an anchor point to swing herself around behind him. Krovik realized his mouth was hanging open and snapped it shut. "The human has just," he said into the microphone, his voice climbing several octaves into genuine confusion. "She has just used Thorvik as gymnastics equipment. That is not a fighting technique. That is not in any combat manual I have ever read. She just vaulted off his face using his own arm as a support beam." The crowd was losing its collective mind. The jeering had stopped completely. The laughter had died in 60,000 throats. What replaced it was something Krovik had only heard a handful of times in his career, a sound that happened when a crowd suddenly realized they were watching something that would be talked about for years. Pure, unfiltered, disbelieving excitement. Thorvik spun around, all forearms swinging in a desperate wide arc designed less to hit something, and more to create space between himself and whatever small nightmare had just kicked him in his face. Rena ducked under the sweep, stepped inside again, and this time there was no hesitation in her movement. She struck 3 times in rapid succession. Solar plexus, throat plate junction, the small cluster of sensory organs just below his secondary eyes. Each strike was precise. Each strike was minimal force. Each strike found a weakness that should not have been visible to someone who had never fought a Krathnalian before. Thorvik staggered backward, and for the first time in his professional career he looked like he was trying to get away from his opponent instead of toward them. "She is reading him," someone said behind Krovik, and he turned to see his broadcast assistant Belnara staring at the arena with all 4 of her eyes fully dilated. "By the void, she is reading him in real time." "Reading what?" Krovik demanded. "Everything. Body language, weight distribution, which joints compensate when others are injured. She is downloading his entire combat pattern and running predictions faster than he can adapt." Krovik looked back at the fight. Thorvik was trying everything now. He feinted with his upper arms and struck with his lower. Rena swayed backward, the claws missing by millimeters. He tried a leg sweep. She jumped it, landed, and used his extended leg as a stepping stone to deliver an elbow to his shoulder joint. He attempted a grab. She let him catch her wrist, then twisted in a direction that made Krovik's joints ache just watching it, breaking the grip and simultaneously torquing Thorvik's arm into a position that made several audience members gasp. "This is not possible," Krovik said into the microphone, abandoning all pretense of professional commentary. "Humans do not move like this. They do not think like this. Their reaction time is too slow. Their processing speed is too limited. Their combat experience is non-existent, according to every file, every study, every military report. They should not be capable of what I am watching right now." Down in the arena, Rena caught one of Thorvik's strikes, redirected it into another one of his own arms, and used the resulting confusion to sweep his legs. All of them. Simultaneously, 600 kilograms of crystalline champion hit the sand hard enough to send up a dust cloud visible from orbit. The crowd went absolutely feral. Thorvik rolled, came up on 3 limbs because one arm was still not responding correctly, and charged again. Because that was what champions did. They did not quit. They did not retreat. They adapted and overcame. except Rena was adapting faster. She met his charge head-on, which was insane. She was 1/4 his mass. Meeting his charge should have resulted in her becoming a small damp stain on the arena floor. Instead, she timed it perfectly, dropped under his center of gravity, planted her hands, and used his momentum against him. Her legs came up, caught his torso, and she rolled backward, throwing 600 kilograms of confused champion over her head and into the arena wall behind her. The impact made the shields flare bright enough to leave after images. Krovik stood up from his seat without realizing he was doing it. The human has just judo thrown a Krithnalian warform into a reinforced barrier wall, he said, his voice steady despite the fact that his internal organs were all trying to crawl into his secondary thorax. The barrier has held. Thorvik has not. Thorvik peeled himself off the wall, sand and debris falling from his exoskeleton. He was breathing hard now, a rasping sound that Krovik could hear even from the commentator's booth. His movements were slower, defensive. He was hurt. Rena stood in the center of the arena, completely still, barely breathing hard, waiting. She had not said a single word since the fight started. She had not needed to. Krovik sat back down slowly. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said quietly, and the entire Colosseum leaned in to hear him. "I believe we need to have a very serious conversation with whoever wrote the human species file, because that document is either catastrophically incomplete or deliberately misleading, and either option is extremely concerning." Thorvik charged again. Rena smiled. The education was about to continue. Krovik had stopped trying to commentate in any traditional sense, and had instead devolved into what could only be described as live processing his own existential crisis. "She is still not tired," he said into the microphone, watching Rena dodge another four-armed combination that should have liquefied her skeleton. "Thorvik is breathing like he has been fighting for an hour. The human looks like she is waiting for a transport shuttle. This does not match any of the data. This does not match any of it." A memory surfaced, unbidden and unwelcome. 3 cycles ago, a report from some mining colony in the Terran outer territories. A human crew had been trapped in a collapsed shaft for 6 days with minimal oxygen and no food. Rescue teams had arrived expecting to recover bodies. Instead, they found 5 humans who had kept themselves alive through what the report called sheer, irrational refusal to accept death as an outcome. Krovik had laughed when he read it. Everyone had laughed. Persistence was not a combat advantage. Stubbornness did not win fights. Except he was watching Rena move through Thorvik's attacks like she had all the time in the universe, and he was suddenly not laughing anymore. Another memory. A medical journal he had skimmed for a comedy piece about weak species. Human adrenal response could increase strength output by up to 40% in crisis situations. Their pain tolerance could be chemically overridden by their own biology. They could function with injuries that would incapacitate most species, not because they were durable, but because they simply ignored the damage and continued moving. The article had called it inadvisable evolutionary design. Krovik was starting to think the article had missed the point entirely. Down in the arena, Thorvik was no longer fighting to win. He was fighting to survive. His attacks had lost all coordination. He was swinging wild, desperate, hoping that one hit would connect and give him the opening he needed to end this nightmare. Rena was not giving him that opening. She moved around him like water around stone, never where he expected, always exactly where she needed to be. And Krovik realized, with dawning horror, that she was not just winning, she was teaching. Every strike she landed was educational. Every dodge was a demonstration. Every counter was a correction. She was showing Thorvik, showing the crowd, showing the entire galaxy that was watching this broadcast, exactly where every assumption about humans had been catastrophically dangerously wrong. "She is lecturing him," Krovik said aloud, his voice barely above a whisper but still picked up by the microphone. "This is not a fight. This is a seminar on why humans should never have been classified as Class 7. This is a dissertation on the difference between harmless and peaceful, and we are all enrolled as students whether we like it or not." Thorvik lunged forward with all 4 arms extended in one final desperate attempt to grab, to crush, to do anything that would stop the small horror that had been systematically dismantling his entire career for the past 8 minutes. Rena caught his upper right wrist, stepped inside his guard for what had to be the 20th time, and drove her fist into his chest plate with every ounce of strength her small frame could generate. The crystalline armor held, but the force traveled through it anyway, and Thorvik's entire body locked up as his nervous system tried to process what had just happened to his internal organs. He dropped to one knee, then both knees, then forward onto his hands. The crowd had gone completely silent. Rena stood over him, breathing steady, barely winded, and spoke her first words of the entire fight. "Stay down." Her voice was quiet, calm, not threatening, not gloating, just a simple statement of fact, delivered with the certainty of someone who knew exactly how much damage she could do and was offering him the courtesy of avoiding it. Thorvik tried to stand. His body refused the command. He tried again, all four arms shaking with effort, his exoskeleton creaking with strain. Rena waited. Thorvik leaned into the microphone, his voice shaking slightly. "The champion is attempting to rise," he said. "His body is not cooperating. The human has not moved. She is giving him the chance to surrender with dignity, which is more mercy than anyone in this arena expected, and significantly more than Thorvik has ever given any opponent in his 73-fight career." Thorvik's arms buckled. He collapsed back onto the sand, mandibles clicking in what Thorvik recognized as the Krathanalian expression for pain mixed with disbelief. The referee was staring at his timer like it had personally betrayed him, clearly trying to decide if this qualified as a knockout or if he needed to wait for something more definitive. Rena made the decision for him. She turned her back on Thorvik, walked to the center of the arena and raised one hand, not in victory, not in celebration, just acknowledgement that the fight was over. The crowd exploded. Thorvik was not done. Pride, stupidity, or some combination of both drove him back to his feet. His exoskeleton was cracked in 4 places. His breathing sounded like gravel being processed through a malfunctioning air filtration system. 2 of his arms were hanging at angles that anatomy did not typically recommend, but he stood. Rena heard him rising and turned around slowly. The expression on her face was not surprise. It was something closer to resignation mixed with respect. She had given him the opportunity to end this cleanly. He had declined. What happened next was on him. "Oh no," Thorvik said into the microphone. "Oh no. Thorvik, what are you doing?" "Champion, this is not bravery. This is the opposite of bravery. This is your nervous system, writing checks your body cannot cash," Thorvik roared. A sound that started strong and ended in something uncomfortably close to a wheeze, and charged one final time. Rena did not move until he was 3 meters away. Then she did something that Thorvik would spend the next 6 months trying to adequately describe to people who had not witnessed it firsthand. She ran toward him, directly at him. Full sprint, closing the distance faster than his damaged nervous system could process. At the last possible second, she dropped into a slide, her body horizontal, passing between his legs as his claws swept through empty air above her. As she passed beneath him, she reached up with both hands, grabbed the lower edge of his chest plate and pulled, not down, not back. She pulled forward, in the same direction he was already moving, adding her momentum to his in a way that physics absolutely allowed, but common sense strongly discouraged. Thorvik's own charge became his downfall, literally. His center of gravity shifted forward past the point of recovery. His legs, already compromised, could not compensate. 600 kilograms of crystalline warform went from charging predator to tumbling catastrophe in under 2 seconds. He hit the ground face first with enough force that the impact sensors embedded in the arena floor registered it as a potential structural concern. Rena completed her slide, rolled to her feet, and was standing upright before Thorvik had finished bouncing. The referee stared at both fighters, then at his timer, then at the rapidly forming crater in the sand where Thorvik had impacted. He raised his signaling device and triggered the match-end klaxon. The crowd detonated. 60,000 beings erupted into chaos that registered on seismic monitors in 3 adjacent systems. Half were cheering with the kind of manic energy that came from watching every assumption they owned get systematically destroyed. The other half were frantically accessing their datapads, pulling up betting records, recalculating odds, trying to comprehend how they had just lost truly staggering amounts of credits on what was supposed to be the safest bet in the entire sector. Down in the expensive seats, the professional fighters were on their feet. Not cheering, not celebrating, just standing there with expressions that ranged from shock to horror to intense professional interest. 3 separate combat instructors were already placing calls to their administrative offices. 4 retired champions were accessing Earth's location in the Galactic database. 1 Thexian warform was writing numbers on a datapad with shaking hands, recalculating threat assessments in real time. Krovik sat in his booth, microphone still active, and tried to find words that adequately captured what had just happened. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said finally, his voice somehow both calm and completely unhinged. "The winner, by knockout, in 9 minutes and 47 seconds, representing Earth and apparently representing every military intelligence failure in recorded galactic history, Rena Vesquez." The medical team rushed onto the arena floor, heading directly for Thorvik, who was attempting to communicate that he was fine through a series of clicks that very clearly indicated he was not fine. Rena walked toward the exit tunnel. She did not wave. She did not celebrate. She did not showboat or play to the crowd or do any of the theatrical victory nonsense that fighters typically did. She just walked out, like she had finished a routine training session and had somewhere else to be. Krovik watched her go and felt something shift in his understanding of the galaxy. "The human is leaving," he said into the microphone, more to himself than to the audience. "She is walking away like this was ordinary, like she did not just rewrite every combat assessment of her species, like this was always how it was going to end, and we were the only ones surprised by it." He paused. "I need a drink. I need several drinks. This broadcast is concluded. Please exit in an orderly fashion and try not to think too hard about what you just witnessed, because I suspect if we all think too hard about it, we are going to have to admit some very uncomfortable truths about what else we might be wrong about." The crowd was still roaring. Thorvik was still not moving. And somewhere in the back of Krovik's mind, a small voice was asking a question he really did not want to answer. If humans could do this, what else could they do when properly motivated? Krovik sat in his commentator's booth long after the crowd had begun filing out, long after the medical team had loaded Thorvik onto an emergency transport sled, long after the arena staff had started sweeping sand over the blood and impact craters. His assistant Velnara was frantically fielding communication requests from approximately 200 different news agencies, military consultants, and what appeared to be several governmental intelligence divisions, who suddenly had extremely urgent questions about Earth and its inhabitants. "They are asking if we have footage from multiple angles," Velnara said, her voice climbing into ranges that indicated stress. "They are asking if the human used any enhancement technology. They are asking if Thorvik took a dive. They are asking if this was staged. They are asking everything except the one question they should be asking." "Which is?" Krovik asked, though he already knew the answer. "What else have we gotten wrong?" Krovik pulled up the species file on humans one more time, scrolling through the classifications, the threat assessments, the military evaluations. Class 7 sentient species, negligible threat level, minimal combat capability. Avoid engaging in persistence contests but otherwise consider harmless. He deleted the file. Not modified, not updated, deleted, because that file was not incomplete. It was not outdated. It was dangerous. It was the kind of intelligence failure that got entire fleets destroyed because someone had checked a box 40 cycles ago and nobody had bothered to verify if the box was still accurate. "Do you want to know what the betting odds are on humans now?" Velnara asked, looking at her datapad with an expression that might have been amusement or horror or both. "Probably not. But tell me anyway. 3 hours ago, odds on a human winning any professional combat match were 8,000 to 1. Current odds as of 6 minutes ago are even money. Not because bookmakers think humans are suddenly amazing fighters, because bookmakers have no idea what humans are anymore, and when bookmakers do not know something, they default to caution." Krovik laughed. It came out slightly manic. "Do you know how many beings just lost their entire savings betting on Thorvik?" he asked. "Current estimates are in the hundreds of thousands. Some of them are requesting investigations. Some of them are claiming fraud. Most of them are just sitting in shock, trying to process that they bet against a species they knew nothing about except what a file told them." Down in the arena, the cleanup crew had found something. One of them was holding up a small object, examining it in the light. After a moment, Krovik recognized it. A fragment of Thorvik's exoskeleton, cracked clean through. Battle damage from a being whose species was not supposed to be capable of damaging crystalline armor. "I have been commentating fights for 30 years. Krovik said quietly. "I have seen enhancements. I have seen illegal augmentation. I have seen chemical boosting and genetic modification and technological integration. I know what those look like. That human down there did not have any of it. That was just what she could do naturally. Which means somewhere on Earth, there are 8 billion more just like her." "Actually," Velnara said, scrolling through updated information on her datapad, According to the intelligence briefing that just got declassified approximately 20 minutes ago in response to this fight, humans have multiple specialized combat disciplines. Different schools, different approaches, different philosophies. Rena Vasquez is listed as a practitioner of something called Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai, and wrestling. There are apparently hundreds of other systems. Krovic felt something in his thorax clench. They have hundreds of different ways to fight. They have been fighting each other for their entire evolutionary history. Their planet does not have a unified government. They have been in a state of low-level continuous warfare for approximately 10,000 years. They are not peaceful because they do not understand violence. They are peaceful because they understand it extremely well and decided they were tired of it. Krovic thought about that, really thought about it. Humans were not weak. They had never been weak. They had just been quiet. They had joined the galactic community, accepted their Class 7 ranking, let everyone else assume they were harmless, and had gone about their business without bothering to correct anyone's assumptions, not because they could not, because they did not need to, until someone somewhere had made the catastrophic mistake of giving one of them a reason. Vilnara, Krovic said slowly, I need you to send a message to the Colosseum scheduling department. What message? Tell them that if any other promoters are thinking about booking humans as underdogs for execution matches, they should reconsider. Tell them that what we just witnessed was not a fluke. It was a warning. And tell them that the galaxy just learned a very expensive lesson about the difference between harmless and helpless. Vilnara nodded and started typing. Krovic stood up, gathered his equipment, and took one last look at the arena floor where Rena Vasquez had rewritten the combat assessment of her entire species in under 10 minutes. You know what the worst part is? He said to Vilnara. What? She was not even trying to make a statement. She was just fighting. Which means this is what humans consider normal effort. I genuinely do not want to know what happens when they actually get angry. He walked toward the exit, then paused and looked back. Oh, and Vilnara? Update the betting odds for the next scheduled human fighter. To what? Krovic smiled, the expression entirely devoid of humor. Do not bother. Nobody is going to be stupid enough to bet against them anymore. The galaxy has learned its lesson. Humans are not Class 7. They never were. They were just waiting for someone to ask them to prove it. He left the booth and headed for the nearest bar, because if he was going to process the fact that his entire understanding of galactic threat assessment had just been destroyed by a 1.7-meter-tall woman with no natural weapons and a really solid understanding of physics, he was going to need something significantly stronger than water. Behind him, on every screen in the Colosseum, the replay was already running. Rena Vasquez, taking that single step forward. The moment everything changed, the bookmakers would remember it. The military analysts would study it. And every species in the galaxy would have to reconsider what they thought they knew about the quiet little species from the third planet in an unremarkable solar system. The ones who smiled when they fought, the ones who had been harmless right up until the moment they decided not to be. Krovic ordered his drink and raised it in a silent toast to Rena Vasquez wherever she was. She had taught the galaxy a lesson today. He just hoped the tuition had not been too expensive, though judging by the betting losses, it absolutely had been.